Most people don't realize that a police officer touching your taillight during a traffic stop isn't just a routine habit. It's a practice rooted in decades of police procedure, and what happens in those first few seconds can either protect you or cost you everything in court. Right now, across the United States, thousands of drivers, many of them seniors, are unknowingly waiving their legal rights during traffic stops simply because they don't know what the law actually says they can and cannot do. The rules have quietly shifted. Court rulings in recent years have changed how evidence is collected, how interactions are recorded, and how your own behavior at that window gets used against you later. Here's what nobody is telling you straight. The moment that officer makes physical contact with your vehicle, a legal clock starts ticking. What you say, what you do, and even what you don't do in the next 60 seconds can determine whether you walk away clean or walk into a courtroom at a serious disadvantage. Stay right here, because what you're about to learn could be the most important driving information you've heard in years. So let's start from the very beginning, because most people think a traffic stop is simple. You get pulled over, you hand over your license and registration, maybe you get a ticket, and you drive away. But that's not really how it works anymore. And frankly, it hasn't worked that way for a long time. The reality is that a modern traffic stop is a highly structured legal event, and every single thing that happens during it can become evidence. That includes the moment the officer walks up to your car and touches your taillight. Now you might be wondering, why do officers even do that? Why touch the taillight at all? This goes back decades. Traditionally, officers would tap or touch the rear of a vehicle to leave their fingerprints on it. The original reason was practical and even a little sobering. If something went wrong during the stop, if the officer was harmed or killed, their fingerprints on the car would prove they had contact with that specific vehicle. It was a safety measure, a way of saying, I was here. But here's where it gets interesting for you as a driver. That physical touch also serves another purpose in today's world. It can startle you. It can cause you to react. And your reaction, your words, your movements, your nervous behavior can all be observed and noted by that officer before they ever reach your window. Think about that for a second. Before you've even said a word, before you've handed over a single document, that officer has already started forming an impression of you based on how you responded to that unexpected tap on your car. If you jumped, if you reached for something quickly, if you turned around sharply, all of that gets mentally logged. And in states where dashboard cameras and body cameras are running from the moment the officer exits the vehicle, it gets physically logged too. That footage can and does show up in court. So what should you actually do the moment you hear or feel that tap? The answer is simple, but it requires you to be deliberate about it. You stay calm. You keep your hands visible. You do not reach for anything until you are asked. You do not turn around aggressively or make sudden movements. You take a breath and you wait. This sounds basic, but you would be surprised how many people panic in that moment and do something that looks suspicious on camera, even when they have absolutely nothing to hide. Your body language in those first few seconds is part of the legal record now, and you want that record to show a calm, cooperative, law-abiding driver. Now let's talk about what happens next, because this is where a lot of seniors, and honestly, a lot of drivers of all ages, make mistakes that they don't even realize are mistakes. The officer approaches your window. They ask for your license, registration, and proof of insurance. This part feels routine, but there is a right way and a wrong way to handle it. The right way is to move slowly and deliberately. Before you reach into your glove box or your center console, you tell the officer exactly what you are about to do. You say something like, "My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it now." That simple statement protects you. It tells the officer you are not reaching for a weapon. It demonstrates that you are cooperative and communicative. And again, if there's a camera running, which there almost certainly is, it shows a jury or a judge exactly how calm and reasonable you were. What you do not want to do is reach around quickly without saying anything, or dig through a pile of papers in a rushed and anxious way. Even if you are just nervous because getting pulled over makes everyone nervous, that kind of frantic movement does not look good on camera. Take your time, breathe, narrate your movements if necessary. It protects you legally, and it keeps the interaction calm for everyone involved. Here's something else that is critically important, and that a lot of people genuinely do not know. You have the right to remain silent beyond the basics. You are legally required to provide your license, registration, and proof of insurance. In most states, you are required to identify yourself, but you are not required to answer questions like, "Where are you coming from?" or "Where are you headed?" or "Have you been drinking tonight?" or "Do you know why I pulled you over?" These are investigative questions. They are not requirements. And anything you say in response to those questions can absolutely be used against you in court. This is not about being rude or uncooperative. You can politely decline. You can say, "I prefer not to answer questions without an attorney present." That is your constitutional right under the Fifth Amendment, and exercising it does not make you look guilty. It makes you look informed. Now, let's talk specifically about something that has been changing in traffic law across multiple states over the last several years, and that directly affects seniors more than many other groups. There have been significant updates in several states regarding what officers are and are not allowed to do during a routine traffic stop. In the past, an officer could extend a traffic stop almost indefinitely if they had what they called reasonable suspicion of additional criminal activity. But a landmark Supreme Court case, Rodriguez v. United States, decided in 2015, made it very clear that an officer cannot extend a traffic stop beyond the time necessary to handle the matter for which you were pulled over unless they have independent reasonable suspicion of a crime. What that means in plain language is this. If you were pulled over for a broken taillight, the officer cannot hold you there for 20 minutes asking questions and waiting for a drug-sniffing dog to arrive unless they have a specific and articulable reason to suspect you of something beyond that taillight. The stop has to be reasonably brief and focused on the reason for the stop. Why does this matter for you? Because if an officer does extend your stop beyond what is reasonably necessary and nothing is found, any evidence gathered during that extended period may be thrown out in court. But here is the catch, and this is the part that trips people up. You have to know your rights well enough to be able to tell your attorney exactly what happened and in what order. You have to remember the timeline. You have to be able to say when the officer finished writing the ticket, whether the stop continued after that, what was said, and what happened next. Most people are so flustered during a traffic stop that they cannot accurately reconstruct the timeline afterward. So make a mental note. Pay attention to when the officer says the stop is essentially over, when they hand your documents back, because anything that happens after that point has different legal implications. There is also something seniors specifically need to be aware of when it comes to medications. If you are pulled over and an officer suspects impaired driving, the conversation can shift very quickly from a simple traffic stop to a DUI investigation. What many people do not realize is that driving under the influence of prescription medication is treated the same as driving under the influence of alcohol in every single state. If you take medications that carry warnings about drowsiness or impaired judgment, and many seniors do because managing multiple prescriptions is just part of life at a certain age, you need to know that this is a real legal exposure. You do not have to volunteer information about your medications. If an officer asks, you can decline to answer without an attorney present. And if you are asked to take a field sobriety test, you should understand that in most states, you have the right to refuse, though that refusal can carry its own legal consequences depending on the state. Knowing your specific state's implied consent laws before you ever get behind the wheel is something every senior driver in America should do. Let's also talk about what to do after the stop is over, because this step is almost universally ignored, and it is one of the most important things you can do to protect yourself legally. As soon as it is safe to do so, once you have driven away or pulled into a parking lot, you should write down everything you remember about the stop. Write down the officer's name and badge number if you were able to get it. Write down the exact location, the time, and the reason the officer gave for pulling you over. Write down what questions were asked and what you said. Write down whether the officer touched your vehicle, where they stood, whether a second officer was present, and whether you noticed any cameras. This written record, made immediately after the stop while your memory is fresh, is extraordinarily valuable if the stop ever leads to a ticket you want to contest or, more seriously, charges you need to defend against. Your attorney will thank you for it. A judge will find it credible precisely because you created it right away. And here is the broader truth that ties all of this together. The law is not designed to be a trap for honest people, but it can absolutely work against you if you don't know how it functions. Seniors in this country are some of the most law-abiding, careful, and responsible drivers on the road. But being a good driver is not the same as knowing your legal rights during a traffic stop. And not knowing those rights is where good people end up in bad situations. The moment that officer touches your taillight, the legal interaction has begun. How you handle the next few minutes, your composure, your communication, your awareness of what you are and are not required to do, is what determines whether you leave that stop empowered or whether you leave having accidentally given away rights that the Constitution was specifically designed to protect for you. This is not about distrust of law enforcement. Most officers are doing their jobs professionally and fairly. This is about you knowing your role in that interaction just as clearly as they know theirs. Because at the end of the day, no one is going to protect your rights for you. You have to know them yourself. And now, you do.